Evening, everybody. This is Dr. Hack. We're going to continue on with our endgame series today. This is going to be brief and practical. All the best things. Let's do this. So we're going to build onto our knight endgames a little bit, but we want to explain the concept. We want to try to give you the concept today that knight endgames are almost the same as pawn endgames. And so anytime you know a new thing about a pawn endgame, you also know a new thing about a knight endgame. Let me show you what I mean. So do you remember this one? This is white to move and win, and you have to go and capture that pawn. How do you do it? Right? You come at it from the side. I know you do that. So we're going to move the king up this way, and then he's going to move, right? And then we're going to move in, and we're going to slowly work our way across to the right here to win the pawn. And there is absolutely nothing black can do about it. Right. So we know that we outflank a pawn when they're locked together, and that's how we win it. So let's stick a knight in front of a pawn. This is now the exact same end game, but now there's a knight sitting here. And this is locked together, and the pawn can't move, and we come at it from the side in order to win it. Aha. And so because of that, we know exactly what to do. And black can try to stop us, but it's going to be very difficult for him to do that. Okay, and he's eventually going to have to move away. And you see he can't move there because of the pawn. And he can't move there because of the knight. And so we are forced to move away, and he gets all the pawns. And then we're going to make this one into a queen and win the game. Now, if you start exploring this stuff on your own, you need a tool to do that with. And that's what all of this nonsense is over here. In leechess.org, in the studies feature, if you put 7 pieces on the board or less, the computer can solve it all the way to the end because all that information is stored. And it's a huge amount of information. We don't have enough to put 8 pieces on the board because the computers just aren't that big yet. But we can put 7 on the board. And we'll just illustrate that, right? We count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces so the computer knows who's winning. And it also knows which moves are winning. And if you scroll down, it knows which moves lose too. If you play this one, it's really bad. You lose the game. Okay. And there were 2 draws if you lose your knight a different weird way. White can still draw the game. But if we add a 7th piece to that, like if I add another pawn, like say here, the computer still knows who's winning. But if we add an 8th piece, all of a sudden it doesn't know anymore. So table bases work up to 7 men on the board. Doesn't matter which ones, any combination it will know. Okay. So now we ask the question here, is white still winning this game? Extra pawn on the board. And since we know that knights can move backwards, thank goodness, if this was just a pawn, we know that black would be winning now because this is a passed pawn, right? But since they're locked together, we know that in order to win this one, we have to outflank it. And since the knight is good enough to be able to move back to win this pawn, we can still do that. And so we can still guess. Even though the pawn end game is starting to win for black because we've got a knight and he doesn't, we can guess that we're still winning the game. And the way that we go about it is the same as we would if we had a pawn ending. So let me put a famous endgame in front of you. And let's try to do this practically. This is Frank Marshall playing, I want to say Mikhail Chigrin. I don't remember his first name right now. We can look it up on Google, I suppose. So it's played in 1900, way before my era. I'm not that old. And we got to figure out what to do. This is white to move. Think about it for a minute, and then I'll kind of show you what I know. Okay, so the first thing that we want to figure out is, if these knights were gone off the board, who would be winning? If they just poof, disappeared. And I think that one, we know with the pawn endings, that an outside passed pawn is very powerful, isn't it? If this pawn runs to the end of the board, this king has to be close enough to stop that. Is this king close enough to stop that right now? Well, we remember this thing, right? Remember the square of the pawn. And the black king is most certainly not within that square, and therefore he is not close enough. If the knights were just missing, white would win the game. Okay, well, what if the king was close enough? And let's remove the knights and put the king close enough. Who's winning now? This is more difficult, right? Because we can't just go and help the pawn get in. Because as soon as we do that, black makes his own passed pawn. And then our king's going to have to walk over and get that one while his king gets this one. And then it's a pawn race to see who can make a queen here or here first. Oh, that's so far away and so hard to calculate, isn't it? Well, the table base helps us. It says it's a draw with best play. Perfect. So we can guess that there are moves that we can play that won't win for white. What if we played this move? All of a sudden, black's winning move goes away, because if he plays it, we can go en passant and we can make a queen. So now I think white is always winning this pawn ending, because black's pawns actually can't move. And as soon as we do that thing where we use this one as bait, or we abandon it in order to run over and take all of these guys, that's when we'll win the game with white. So we let him have it. He takes it, and that's what the outside pass pawns are good for, right? They decoy the king way away from the game. And while we're doing that, we run over and win these pieces. It worked. We won the last pawn, and we know because our king's in front of this one, we're going to win the game. All we have to do is make it to these squares. Well, how is he ever going to stop us from back there, right? Just not happening. We're in. We've won. Boo-hoo. Okay, so we go back and we go, well, the pawn end game for white, if we were to play this move, is still completely winning regardless of where the king is then. Huh. Okay, so go back to the famous ending. So what are the two things that we know about this? We know that if we played the knight exchange, if we tried to exchange knights, black will run away because the exchange loses. He won't do it. We also know that we can make our pawn endgame completely winning if we play the move g5 and can hold that pawn there. All right, well, let's combine all those ideas now. The knight has to leave. We've played g5, right? He can't make any progress. What does he do? Well, maybe the king tries to come and help because the king needs to get back in range of this thing. We can offer the piece trade again. Can he accept it? No, because if the knights trade off the board, his king is way too far away still. And by way too far away, I mean not too far away. And we'd have to move our king up to help. Backpedaling. That's fun. But we would be able to win because we know how one pawn endings work. And we could get up here and do it, right? So he can't trade the knights off still. And so he has to move away again. And now as we progress, we see that maybe this knight will have to sacrifice itself for the pawn. And if that happens, can we win what's left? I wonder, right? I wonder. Notice we didn't take it because we lost our knight. Okay. Can we win this one? How do we win this one? Oh, it's a pawn end game? All we have to do is outflank the pawn? Look, we just did. What if he tries to win our pawn? Oh, we have a knight. And the knight can defend the pawn, and the pawn, he can't play this because we'll just take it and make a queen. So now he's stuck not being able to do anything. He can't walk around here to get back in. Pawn's guarding it, right? And we've already made it into our outflanking position. We're going to win this pawn every time. Oh, so easy now that we know what to look for, isn't it? Crazy. So that's the famous endgame. Now, I had a student, an old student from years past, send me a note because he saw the knight endgame video and he said, "Hey, I had one in a tournament. This is Joe's endgame." And I thought, I want to say thank you, Joe, first of all, for sending this to me. I love it when you guys have this stuff come up. I love to see it. And he said, "Hey, I'm playing white here. Joe's endgame's on the other side of this. But we're looking at the black point of view because we know something about this, don't we? We know this pawn is probably pretty good. It's an outside pass pawn, but it's a rook's pawn, so it's harder to make it into a queen if the king can sit in front of it. So white to play here, and we could flip it around if we wanted to. White to play. How does he make a draw in this game? We know he's not trying to win. We know he's kind of in a bad spot here because the pawn endgame favors black. But maybe he can make a draw. What would you do? Okay, so I think, just my opinion, that if we make one of these two pawn moves, we've probably drawn the game. Because how does black make any of these pawns get past over here? He doesn't, right? And as long as his king can't get through, like he can't get through these squares, right? So he has to walk all the way around. He'd have to go this way, and then he'd have to get up there, and he'd have to go beside the pawn. As long as he can't do any of that, I think we're in great shape to try to make this game into a tie. And if we know the pawn endgames well, maybe we're even in a good spot here to make an outside pass pawn and make him have to go chase it down. And if he has to go chase it down, his king's going to be over here. And if his king's over there, we can go do this, can't we? We have time to go take care of his. So I think white could have held a draw here if he played for a draw, if he didn't try to win. The moment you try to win, I think you start to lose in this kind of game. So we go back and we think, well, what if white was really trying to win? What would he do? I have a feeling this knight would have to come over here to try to help. But remember, the trades with the knights favor black. And so we're going to have to be very, very careful not to accidentally trade the knights, which means this is going to be like walking on pins and needles for us. We can't move here as long as his knight's there. Well, can we even move away, right? Otherwise, this is going to start running again. So we can't move any more with the knight, period. Oh no, here goes the pawn. How do we save it? Oh, we better come back, right? Oh, how are we going to get back there in time? We're not. It's a queen. Oh, right? So as soon as we try to win, we actually start to lose. The knight must stay in place to stop the pawn. And therefore, white's king, his job is to make sure these pawns stay intact. And if he does that, black can't get through. Because he would have to stop these with his king first, or he'd have to switch his king and his knight's position somehow so that the king could help this guy advance through the knight. Because if we recall, knights make really lousy escorts for pawns. Because you can always guard the pawn, but you can never guard the pawn and the square in front of the pawn at the same time. No good. I do hope this helps somebody. You guys have a good week. Take care now. Bye.